Any further comments or questions? If not, we can go over to session 2 by inviting Mireia to present her paper on the digital connectivity, China, the EU, and digital connectivity, followed by Dr. Zhou on Korea-EU FTA case. So Mireia, please.
Good afternoon, everybody. Can you hear me now well as well?
Yes.
Good afternoon from Shanghai. First of all, it's very nice to see you since last time, unfortunately, due to health urgent family matters, I couldn't join. This time is Sebastian, unfortunately, situation. However, I will, yes, I'm currently in Shanghai, but I'll be back to Bochum next week, actually. But at least we finally managed to do a family reunion, so it's very good. So besides this personal good news, for you to know how we are doing in the research. First of all, I uploaded in Dropbox a draft. I think the paper is already having a nice shape. However, we still have about 2 months more because we are I'm doing interviews with some officials from the European Union delegation here in Beijing, also with DG Connect, so from the Commission, and also with some diplomats from the EAS working in connectivity, right? So due to Christmas, probably I didn't manage to interview all of them at this moment, but we are there and it's arranged, which is positive. And the results of those interviews are quite significant for the overall argument and to polish the investigation that is already done. So this is something I wanted to explain to you. So it will be obviously after this data is collected, it will be polished and obviously narrow. Now, we usually prepare PPT, so allow me first to share the PPT with all of you if it's working, that I hope it's working. And can you see it?
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it's not. Let me see. It's not the full page, right? It's not full. No, here it goes. Very good. So we are working now in EU, China, EU, and digital connectivity, but we're going to frame with the framework of global data governance. So first of all, allow me to very briefly introduce you the framework of this research problem, why we focus or why we identify this as a research problem. First of all, as you already may know, data has become a strategic resource for both EU and China due to the economic growth and innovation, but also because it's a prerequisite for many new technologies, such as artificial intelligence models, 5G services, cloud computing, so on and so forth. However, this new data or digital data situation is bringing a lot of concerns, not just to states, but also companies and civil society about several issues: privacy protection, how to store, collect, use big data, ownership, national security. So security issues very important, but most importantly is the regulatory side of this new framework. And here what the problem comes when every state or regions are developing their own regimes. And so we create fragmentation and we create obstacles for interoperability. And we have seen in these years that it is increasing the tendency, right? So data governance has become, for this and many other aspects that I won't mention in this short presentation, a very relevant policy aspect, right? And so policymakers are aiming to create a legal framework to protect those. In addition, I think quite related to the theoretical framework previously Anna and Paul were mentioning, so we have these changes in the international liberal order, also in the digitalization or in the digital affairs framework, we have this power structure changes, right? And here we have the EU and China, both of them trying to launch their own data initiative strategies in this case, then their own regulation for personal and big data. And at the same time, they have this two big initiatives. In the case of connectivity and framework in digital, right? So the digital Silk Road and Global Gateway, actually, if you read it, they have a very important section for digital affairs, right? So under this context, we thought the relevance of this research is because this field is quite new in the scholarly literature, especially on digital connectivity and assessing or analyzing where EU and China has their internal and external position and sectoral or sector-related strategies such as data governance, right? So we aim to first of all understand where the EU and China stand today in global data governance and whether digital connectivity component of the strategic connectivity could be a suitable framework to tackle this issue. And for that, we aim to answer three main research questions. So the first one will be, will the systematic international pressures in view of the unique importance of global data governance drive the EU and China to pursue similar approaches over time? Or on the contrary, are domestic nuances the key explanatory factor that will continue to drive differences in data governance? And then could the policy area of data governance take place within the digital connectivity initiatives? For the research design, very briefly, we are doing multidisciplinary research analysis because, as I mentioned, data governance requires a lot of legal technical background. So we combine international relations, particularly international political economy and legal studies. Then we are with a time frame between 2016 up to now, 2022. Reason is because it's when the regulation and the strategies are being launching. For that, as I said, we will examine the EU-China data governance regimes. We will focus in especially data privacy, cross-border data flows, and data security, which again links a lot with the theoretical framework mentioned before. And then how we can operate this into the claims of connectivity initiatives, right? And why we focus in these two main actors is because currently they are out of the three, including the United States, but they are the two forefront in articulating national level data governance approaches that also are creating ripple effects and reference points around the world. Now the paper looks like this. Obviously an introduction. We have a defining data governance framework and then overview of both data governance approaches, the EU and China, then the understanding in the digital connectivity, and especially EU-China digital connectivity as the way forward for data governance. Just for you, very briefly, to know where we are aiming or explaining in each subsection. So the defining data governance framework is to give the theoretical framework for this particular paper. And due to the differences in the understanding of terminology, we review 5 concepts. So the ones you can see here: digital data, internet governance, data sovereignty, and data security. This will give us the framework also to understand the regimes that the EU and China are tackling or approaching. So we have the similar ways of examining these two. So we look to, in the case of the EU, the political and legal frameworks, basically data strategy, and then the main regulations. And then we highlight the approach for the EU. very similar in the case of China. So we look to the political and legal frameworks. In this case, will be their own data strategy and the main regulation. However, here in the case of China, we have the particularity of three driving forces, which is the economic potential of data, national security, and public pressure. So this is a little bit different to the case of the EU. And we will present also the main approach. For you to know very briefly, here we summarize there are similarities. So for example, it's not everything divergent and contentious, right? We have, especially in regulation for protection to personal data and privacy, similarities, because actually with the new regulation from China, it's taking a lot from the EU GDPR. However, there's a big difference is the EU side will protect, for example, personal data from business, but also state, which is obviously not the case in the Chinese jurisdiction. And we have this national security element very strong. And this is linked to legal measures such as data localization and security assessment, which is a controversy as well for cross-border data, personal and big data both. And then another big difference with the new Data Governance Act from the European Union, which has been recently proposed and approved in Chinese context. So we have an open plural internet versus a closed and internet sovereignty against security. However, within these two, very briefly, I think we can link it very well what Anna was mentioning for the theoretical framework, because what we observe in the roles and positions here is that there is indeed more than a cooperation framework trying to diminish or dilute confrontation and frictions in some areas, particular areas. So that will be very interesting also for the analysis. Very briefly for this section, we didn't go into much detail for understanding digital connectivity, but we just wanted to present the geopolitical implications of it, which was also previously mentioned, and the different approach they tackle to their own initiatives in the digital affairs, which is also important to frame and to see if this is a suitable framework to continue collaborating in this in global data governance issues. We identify here there are similar topics. Both actors are interested to work forward for internal dimension and external dimensions. So this is also I would say a suitable benchmark identification of issues to tackle in the political agenda setting. Now, when it comes to both of them, this will be the last part of this paper. When it comes to the EU-China digital connectivity, specifically for data governance. And here's where it's very relevant to obtain all the data and information from the interviews, because what we can see from papers, especially official documents and statements, is that there is obviously a cooperation and several dialogues, internal meetings, usually more technical, high level, since 2009 when it comes to digital affairs. When it comes particular to data-related matters, it is just 3-4 years before at the level of DigiConnect and Meet, where they start. However, importantly, for example, one of the diplomats from EAS, of course, highlighted the relevance of this high-level digital dialogue that started last year. Now, having said so, we have observed that those issues are tackling very fragmented and without a coherent strategy, right? So we want to discuss with them or obtain from the interviews how they will foresee this, because the Global Gateway emphasizes actually a lot of data-related affairs, although some of the projects are from other regions instead of Asia or China, for example. And with this, the conclusions are still, as I mentioned, a little bit need to be polished. But basically, what we observe is the digital connectivity component is still in the development process, let's say. And so the topic per se of data governance is quite recent. So there's still unclear, concrete political direction in that sense. However, there is a lot of policies and regulatory frameworks ongoing in the internal dimension of each actor. Now, having said so, we observe from both sides that there is also an intention more for inter-regional or multilateral cooperation in this field than bilateral. So that we want to look farther with the interviews, what is also the perception of all the officials, right? And with this, I finish, I close the slide here. And I look very much forward to all your comments.
Thanks, Mireya. Let's have straight away Professor Zhou's presentation.
Should I start?
Yes, please close my screen because you can stop it because I have the division in the computer and for some reason it's black, but you can close it. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. What I've been doing so far is titled as the FTA's role in strengthening connectivity, the case of the EU-Korea FTA. My aim was to present, collect and survey and present empirical evidences showing how the Korea-EU FTA has improved economic connectivity between the two parties. And so what I've done so far is to briefly discuss the background of the FTA, why the two sides decided to sign a trade agreement, and then I introduced some notable features of the EU-Korea FTA, especially EU-Korea FTA was sort of promoted by the EU as the first case of their next generation trade agreement, and also for Korea, it was the first with a major trading partner. And so in terms of tariff liberalization, they did what they could do, as is common in trade agreements these days. But what was more interesting about this FTA than tariff liberalization was the inclusion of trade and sustainable development chapter, which also created a small conflict, a kind of minor conflict between the EU and Korea. So I introduced the importance or the new feature of this chapter in this trade agreement. And I plan to discuss how this inclusion of the Trade and Sustainable Development chapter gave way to this small conflict between the EU and Korea due to some ILO core conventions. Some of them Korea didn't ratify, and the agreement forces Korean government to do their best to ratify them, but they didn't ratify it. They didn't succeed in ratifying until a couple of years ago. So the EU took it as an issue. So they had a panel, and they had an official panel, and then they came up with a conclusion. And then soon after, the Korean government succeeded in ratifying some of the remaining ILO conventions. So I'm planning to introduce this episode. And I'm planning to introduce this episode as a case showing how the inclusion of this Trade and Sustainable Development chapter made the labor standards on both sides more similar than before. Previously, like Korean government didn't ratify some of the ILO core conventions, but due to this FTA, now they have ratified more, so they became similar in labor issues. And yeah, so that's what I'm trying to use this episode as a case showing the FTA's role in improving connectivity. And what I'm planning to spend the majority of the space is to survey and introduce the econometric analysis of the Korea-EU FTA's impact on bilateral trade. So Korea-EU FTA is interesting in many aspects, and one of them is the fact that if we only look at the evolution of the unconditional trade values, then we see clearly that Korea's import from the EU keeps increasing after the FTA, but Korea's export to the EU started stagnating right after the FTA. So some people find it very disappointing, and some people even use it as an evidence against this particular FTA. But there are econometric analysis showing that despite this, despite the trend in the unconditional, the unconditional trend, if you look at, if we carefully do econometric analysis, then we find positive impact of the FTA, at least in trade value. And I thought if the FTA has any role in improving economic connectivity, then the first thing that it will show is through trade value. And so that's why I wanted to survey and introduce some of these studies. So some of them are already there, and I'm planning to make the story a bit richer. And I also plan to show some cases of certain industries. So these are, if you do like econometric analysis at the aggregate level, even at the industrial level. These cases don't really show up, but there are some cases that strongly suggest that Korean manufacturing firms' value chain has moved towards the EU, into the EU. And so this extension of value chain towards the EU, from Korea towards the EU, sort of is benefiting from the existence of the preferential trade agreement. So I'm planning to introduce some of these cases. So I'm thinking of car and batteries for electronic cars. So because there are some pieces of evidences showing that they are benefiting from the existence of the FTA, and we can take this extension of value chain from one country to another as evidence of improved economic connectivity. That's what I thought. So that's why I wanted to introduce those cases. And I'm also thinking of including another case, which was this personal protective equipments trade since the beginning of the pandemic. So if you look at the trend, then since the beginning of the pandemic, Korea and EU are trading a lot in this personal protective equipments. And so if I succeed in finding some other like supporting evidence that such a big and sudden increase when both parties needed them urgently, if I could find some evidence that this trend was thanks to the trade agreement, then I thought I could also use it as an example that this trade agreement has improved economic connectivity. When they don't really need those trade, then they don't really do it. But when there's this pandemic, when this pandemic came, and both parties they needed to trade in these particular products or materials, then thanks to this established trade agreement and this established economic connectivity, they could more easily and more efficiently trade what they needed. So that's what I'm also planning to do here. And so I'm planning to conclude this with this line of story that the Korea-EU FTA has actually improved the economic connectivity. That there are evidences strongly suggesting that this FTA has improved the economic connectivity between the two regions. Yeah. That's it for me.
Thank you, Dr. Zhou. Thanks a lot. So because Yeol-Wi is not present today, we have to discuss these two papers in this session too. Any comments or questions, if you have, please raise and exchange so that the papers can become of more quality.
Okay, let me make a comment. Actually, I was about to make comment in the previous session, but actually I wanted to listen to some more papers because well, we are dealing both with the big framework of globalization and liberal international order. And this is kind of big trend, and we have to deal with very specific issues like a specific trade agreement or digital connectivity. So we are dealing with two different levels. But what I would like to suggest is somehow we need to set the tone of this special issue and this project. Well, I'm not sure whether this will be the good analogy, but the weather in 2019 when we started this project, the geoeconomic and geopolitical, the weather forecast was partly cloudy to cloudy. It was getting kind of the darker and darker, but it was not that dark. But from while experiencing 2020 and 2021, and we are at the beginning of 2022, and the US-China competition got even more severe, and the current pandemic, well, persisted, and we have more gloomy forecasts. So I feel the weather forecast as of today is from cloudy to scattered showers and thunderstorms. So, well, across the continent and across the sea of Indo-Pacific, we are seeing more element of competition and conflict than cooperation. So the connectivity, the idea of connectivity emerged, well, when the weather was partly cloudy, not that clean. But well, the China-EU relation and also the geopolitical situation, geoeconomic situation in East Asia, and China, Taiwan, China, Hong Kong. And so we are seeing, well, indeed, well, in the Pacific, it is merging both European side and Asian side. But well, maybe it would be done as to some degree in the introduction and conclusion part. But I think it would be more interesting if we can highlight, if you can set the tone a little bit more in the dark color, somewhat darkish color, highlighting more of the competition and conflictual element than, well, simply the cooperation side of connectivity. And well, when this outcome will come out, well, maybe hopefully later this year or next year, then I think we can hit the sweeter spot for the reader. So it will be applicable to the first two papers in the first session when we are dealing with the geopolitical and geoeconomic side. But other papers such as US-China competition and in the trade issues, well, we certainly we can talk about the positive progress, but also there are some growing issues. Carbon is becoming another barrier, etc. So, well, my suggestion is somehow, why don't we place those conflictual issues ahead of cooperation? Then we will have much more realistic kind of discussion and evaluation and the necessity for cooperation. Okay, so that would be my comment.
Okay, Anna, you have raised your hands.
I mean, my question here is very much more specific, but I kind of agree with Jae-sung. I think it's very important. And I also think it's very important that we highlight the possibilities for cooperation between Europe and Asian countries. Although if we sort of highlight the geopolitical challenges that we see, we will not forget the very important issue of finding partnerships and finding ways of cooperating on a much more sort of cooperative basis between European countries and Asian countries. I think that would be very interesting, and often it's forgotten when everyone concentrates so much on the US and China. But my question was actually to Mireia, and I was very interested. I would be interested in knowing how you see the reaction from the Chinese side on the Global Gateway, the publication of the Global Gateway Initiative. I mean, you cover the digital side, but there's a lot of sort of digital politics in that paper, and also because you are in China, I would be interested to know if you could sort of relate to us how that strategy was received in China. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you very much, Anna. Should I start? Sorry,
Yes, please.
Well, what I could see here, actually, because I'm in Shanghai located, and I'm more related to the Shanghai level, right? In particularly for the political committee here. However, since the Global Gateway initiative is quite recent, with all my respect to European side, but it haven't been very much covered, to be honest. That's one thing. The coverage is low, I could say. Secondly, the talk goes still wait and see. Where are they going to really focus this as an initiative? But I think what you can see in the news more than academia, because there's no publication yet for that. But in the news, even if they're political or more state-oriented newspapers, it's see how they want to approach this and how they want to collaborate with us. But if we read, because we all read the Global Gate, actually when they talk about digital affairs, there's a lot of issues going on with other regions, which is not Asia. And that, what I read is put a question mark and touted, I mean, what exactly they want to do, or how exactly they want to engage with Asia and other countries such as China. And this is in the case of digital affairs and data, is because there are very important projects and finding projects in investment for example, the fiber cable networks with Latin America and others with Africa, right? So the digital for development. So it is a bit missing the component of Asia, to be honest, when it comes to digital affairs in what is published now. And therefore, there is more question marks than really comments, because it's comments on what exactly. And at least what I read in the last 3 weeks here, and then also with discussing with party members in the Shanghai level, non-national level, but it's still very representative, because the feeling is, yes, very good, but let's see where they go with this, and if they really engage with Asia, and because there is one part was highlighted, that is, if this strategy was EU-Asia connectivity strategy, how come that it goes directly to other regions of the world? So where is Asia right now? I think this was the key message. And I'm sorry, I don't have more information. It's too soon to say more, but that's all I can share.
Okay, thank you. Dong-hee?
Yeah. So I have a small question to Mireia. Do you know if China is aiming at all to have a digital economy agreement with the EU? because when it comes to digital connectivity for trade economists, these days what they imagine in a concrete form is a digital economy agreement, which is becoming which is getting some popularity these days, I think. Especially the UK seems to be very active in making digital economy agreements. So I thought just as a very ignorant suggestion, if you could somehow give some information in the text, whether if they think of signing a digital economy agreement with the EU at all, could be valuable information. Yeah, that's it.
Very good question. So here there are different elements, right? When it goes to digital economy, so China focus more at the international level. So there, for example, in the UN framework, they are or WTO, they are focusing a lot in e-commerce, right? However, when it goes to free trade agreement, including digital provisions, they are more reluctant. So usually they are not very willing to do so, because then it compromises national security element. And this is why it's very important to explain in this particular paper what it means digital or in internet sovereignty and data sovereignty, because we might agree or not, but this is what they frame it and this is how they operate. And therefore, this is how they engage. So for free trade agreements to include digital provisions as such is complicated. However, there are specific provisions they are working on. And for example, one will be related to data ownership in this case, for example. When it comes to cross-border data, or what is called this conflicting issue in the legal side is data localization, then here we have different position, right? However, we have now a paradox. So according to the domestic regulation, it is not possible, right? It's forbidden to do cross-border data as per se because there is the data localization. But they have signed and they have ratified the CBTT, and there you have provisions. So you can have a flexibility. However, they said they also have exceptions in those provisions. And so the exceptions refer to domestic situations. So it becomes a little bit too legal technical, but the situation at this moment for China is avoiding those free trade agreements, including the digital provision. Now, when it comes to digital economy or agreement with EU, it was supposed to be also within the framework of the CAI. And so this is frozen and this is going to be frozen. Now, what it seems, the perception I got here, for example, with this is not China case, but the EU, one EU officer at the EU delegation is thinking more in an inter-regional cooperation agreement, where it includes digital provisions, including, for example, privacy protection. This is a very easy way to work now with China because they have new regulation and align position with the EU, but not obviously when it comes to data security. So they are trying to see if there is a way to collaborate or to issue an agreement in the interregional level, not in the bilateral level. This is the information I got up to now, but it might change in the coming month or year because this is constantly changing. And also with the new Data Governance Act from Europe, there is also a new tone for big data. And there is and this could also could emphasize the frictions, but could also look some as windows, they call it, for alignment and cooperation. And so it's still too new because it was just proposed. So I think we still need to follow up. So I found it very interesting topic to continue follow up, because there is a lot from this in the coming years. But thank you
Excellent.
very much. Very interesting. I'm sorry.
Power.
Yes, thank you. I will have maybe question, comment to Dr. Zhou. I like the idea, and I really like your approach that like traditional approach toward the benefits from FTA is necessarily the only way to measure how we are connected. So you mentioned about the deficit of Korea. And I like the idea of having here the extension of value chains by Korean enterprises, transnational corporations. And I wonder if you could a little bit elaborate how you show the correlations between the FTA liberalization of the components and parts, like you mentioned the electronic area, and the result in moving the activities of corporations to Europe, for example. Yeah, so just short question, if you could say a bit about that. Thank you.
That was also my question. I had the similar question, because what is the connection between FTA and increasing Korean companies' investment into Europe? We know that in the around this time, a number of, about since 5 years ago or so, a few Korean quite competitive battery companies like LG Chemical, SK Innovation, Samsung SDI, the three big boys, they have invested into the V4 countries, right? Is the Visegrad 4 countries. So does this have any connection with the FTA, EU-Korea FTA? Or is it only or more the result of EU's kind of policy change to have supply of essential parts and components from Europe? Or also the cost factor. I mean, not necessarily the FTA factor, but cost factor has influenced the corporate decision to invest into Visegrad countries. So.
Yeah, so Sunghoon and Power. The core of the problem of this idea that I had about including these cases in this project. So it's not at all econometric. I don't have any. I haven't seen any econometric evidence of supporting this idea. And actually, what have been suggested in the literature more systematically is that if there is any effect, it is due to the enlargement. Apart from the batteries, so especially like car manufacturers, when they decided to shift their value chains more into the EU, it was the major factor was the enlargement. So right after the enlargement, they decided to shift or extend their value chains towards the EU. So I'm just but the fact that they are still there, they are not relocating or reshifting their value chains, and they just keep their value chains and deepen their activities there. I'm just trying to connect this with the FTA. If there is any kind of small connection, I thought it would be an interesting story if I could somehow connect this their moving towards the EU, into the EU, and the FTA that came later. If I could somehow make a story connecting these two important phenomena, I thought it could make a nice case story, but it's not at all systematic, not at all econometric. It's just what we observe, and I'm just trying to see if I could make a story. And for the batteries, I think Sung-Hoon has a point, and again, there's no econometric analysis or any other systematic study that I've seen. But yeah, I'm just trying to see if I can connect these two stories, and if I succeed, then it would make a nice story.
I think it needs some further study.
Right.
Yeah, further analysis.
Or I could just
Yeah.
leave as sort of like for future studies, there are these kind of evidences. So to see if there's any kind of connection, it would be a valuable contribution or something like that.
Quite related with this is another question I have. I mean, probably the question is not only to Dong-hee, but also to Power. The fundamental question is there, because Dong-hee was mentioning several times about contributing to increasing connectivity, right? So then fundamental question is, how do we measure the connectivity? Probably in Power's paper, that could be addressed, how to measure the connectivity, because you are writing on the driving forces of connectivity, and driving forces connectivity. So connectivity is driven by some factors, and how we can measure the connectivity can be nicely related with this topic. So I think it will be quite desirable to have this discussion theoretically in the first papers, so that we can use common languages, right? Because Dong-hee was mentioning several times contributing to increasing connectivity, but I was wondering what is how you can see connectivity is increasing, right? So that's my comment. And increasing burden to Power. Sorry for that.
No, thank you, because it's a fundamental question, right?
Yeah.
And yes, in the literature there are many indexes for that, so we can find it, and maybe we can just show the different indexes in the table, just showing that this approach is sometimes done. And yeah, but again, the article will grow. Yeah, it will be bigger and bigger. But still, it's at the beginning. So like kind of preparing the monograph for. Okay.
I will also, in my part, I will try to make the flow from Power's definitions to this very specific case.
That's
right. I will try to make the flow smooth.
Yeah. Okay. Any further questions or comments? Well, if not, then we have prepared some break of about 20 minutes. 20 minutes, okay, right? So we will rejoin at 7:05.
Okay.
7:05, we will rejoin. Thank you for the two first sessions. And the discussion was really more concrete and was very interesting. Thank you. So see you in 20-minute time.
See you.
Thank you.